You're on with Lauren Zayu for Unbossed, Unbothered, and Unfiltered, a show about what you say, how you say it, and what to do after it's said. We'll talk about communications and messaging blunders, successes, distractions, and what all of it means for you. Join me for a crash course in what you need to know in politics and issues driving the 2020 elections. Hello and welcome to Unbossed, Unbothered, and Unfiltered. I'm your host, Lauren Zayu. Today we are gearing up for election night, which is 1 week away for us right now and much closer by the time that you hear and see this. My guests today are on the front lines of electoral politics, but on different sides. So today we have Jessica Taylor, Senate and Governor's Editor for the Cook Political Report, and we have Dorien Paul Blythers, who is Political Director for End Citizens United and Let America Vote. I know both of them well, and I'm really excited to hear what we have for them to say today. So keeping that in mind, I want to welcome Dorien Paul Blythers and Jessica Taylor.
Hi, Lauren. Thanks for having me.
Hi, Dorien. Hi,
Jessica.
Hi. So we can kick it off. If you want to go ahead and get the viewers and listeners familiarized with who you are and your story. Dorien, we'll start with you.
Excellent. Thank you for having me again. So I'm Dorien Paul Blythers, Political Director at End Citizens United and Let America Vote, where I have been serving this cycle, but have been in Washington, D.C. for almost 13 years. I came in fall of 2007 to attend Howard University, where I studied political science and community development. Initially thought I was coming to Howard to become a wildlife biologist or wildlife veterinarian, but Bio 101 quickly told me otherwise. But yeah, I left Howard and went straight to my first political job, which was as a field organizer for Barack Obama in 2012, and have since gone on to work on a number of congressional races across the country, have worked for some party committees, and most recently worked for Senator Kamala Harris, our VP nominee, as a regional political director on her presidential, and traveled with her in the 18 cycle, campaigning for Democrats up and down the ballot. So super excited to be here with you today and looking forward to this conversation.
Sounds good. And Jessica?
Well, Dorien, I think you traded wildlife management for a different kind of wildlife sometime.
Yes.
Yeah, so much like Dorien, I moved up here to DC right after I graduated in 2007 from Furman University in South Carolina, and I've worked in political journalism since then. I started at National Journal. I've been at Politico, NBC News, The Hill, and then I spent 5 years at NPR as a political reporter during the 2016 and 2018 cycles. And then at the beginning of this year, I joined the Cook Political Report, which we are a nonpartisan political newsletter and handicapper. We're the oldest one out there, founded in 1984. And what we do is we dive really deep into every single race. So if you want to know about what is happening in a race, we get to dive into it. And I think this melds sort of my love of journalism and writing, but also what I discovered when I came to DC was really a love of deep into politics. I also my first job actually up here is the research director on the Almanac of American Politics, which is the Bible of American politics. And I'm now one of the senior authors on the book. So we dive into every congressional district. So that's what I'm getting to do. It's a great, just right now, it's just been great, COVID and the weirdness of all of it notwithstanding. But that I get to talk to both sides and see data. And, I'm trying to make my best guess based on it's partly quantitative and qualitative of which way we think races are going to pan out. So, I focus mainly on Senate and governor's races.
Sounds good. Both of those, I imagine, are very important in a cycle like this, as is every race. So keeping that in mind, Jessica, you mentioned something about COVID, of course, having a huge impact on this cycle. And what I wanted to kind of open this conversation with is we're seeing a lot of buzz, I guess is the word, about the really long lines at polling places and the really increased early vote numbers. We know a host of people are also doing mail-in ballots and voting early. And so I guess what I wonder for both of you in your experience is we're on Twitter, at least I'm seeing a clash of people saying this is voter suppression and should not be applauded, and other people saying, well, this shows the excitement that people have for this election. And so also acknowledging it can be both. But what is there anything to make of the long lines and early vote numbers, and what do you think it indicates in your experience?
I think it depends on county by county, and really I think some of these the first few days in Georgia and in many states, for instance, there were very long lines, but I think that just shows that people, want to get out and cast their vote as soon as they can, that we have just very deep voter enthusiasm. And I think people, want to just do it as soon as possible. Many people that are just driven to make their voice heard. I think that, and we sort of caution against, I think, reading too much into some of the early vote numbers. But certainly what we do see, though, at this point, they have surpassed almost over half of the total of number of votes cast overall in 2016. So I think that we could reach 155, 160 million votes, which would be, percentage-wise, the highest that we've had since 1900. And I just think the more people that are voting, the better. The more people that we have engaged in our democracy, the better. And I think the past 4 years have certainly driven a lot of people off the sidelines and been registered to vote, certainly too. And, what we do see, and we see this in polling very consistently, though, is that Democrats are very motivated to vote early, whether it be by absentee or in person, and that Republicans are many of them are planning to vote on election day, though, too. What I've heard, though, from a lot of Republican senators and people working on Senate campaigns, though, is, of course, we've seen President Trump, really attack mail-in voting and absentee ballots when this is, in fact, something that has been going on for a long time. I mean, certainly the rules and regulations in each state have been adjusted and relaxed because of concerns about safety and health safety and things at polling places. But of course, when he talks about voter fraud, it's essentially non-existent when you look at the data and everything. And I've heard a lot of frustration from Republicans that he keeps doing this because they need those voters. They need their voters also to turn out, many of them who are older and might have health concerns, and that they need them to feel like they can vote absentee. And I also think it's just leaving a lot to chance if you're waiting until election day. Florida, what if there's another hurricane that's coming? There's a snowstorm in, Wisconsin or Michigan. It's just when you leave it to just that one day, if you're not super motivated, then you're not gonna, you may not go out. And I think that puts Trump and Republicans in a really precarious position.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked this question, because one of the first videos I watched this morning was Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez doing a presser where she was talking about this question. And I don't know where I saw it, but it was exactly as you posed it. Are long lines a sign of voter enthusiasm or a sign of voter suppression? And being from Atlanta, I also think that it's fitting that Atlanta and Georgia has really become ground zero for this conversation on voting rights and voter suppression in this cycle. Not only because the former Secretary of State is running for one of the hotly contested congressional seats there, but you also have Reverend Warnock speaking from Dr. King's pulpit. You have the passing of John Lewis, and this kind of culmination of events make it ripe for this conversation. But I guess the way that I would answer the question is that it's slightly different, and it's because I started off this work as an organizer. We want people as organizers to vote early, right? If campaigns and elections are an exercise in list building, we want to make sure that we can count those votes before election day internally, right? So that we know exactly who it is who is yet to turn out, so that we can reach them this cycle via text or perhaps by a socially distant lit drop in somebody's neighborhood. So this question of voter suppression, however, I think is extremely important. And whether or not long lines are a sign of suppression, I think that we can have that debate. But what was just pointed out about the president's comments, I believe that's the true suppression, right? It's having that the pulpit of the presidency and being able to dissuade voters from participating in a system like vote by mail, in which you yourself have voted in and utilized. So states like Florida, have been doing this for a long time. Washington State conducts their elections by mail. The United States military, right, conducts vote by mail elections, or as an option for our servicemen and women to vote. So this is not new. Oh, by the way, we are in a global pandemic, which we know, is another factor that's driving this conversation, and it's one that should absolutely be taken seriously. So I am hopeful that we can lean into this idea of enthusiasm, and I think that we will know on election day. The folks that I'm hearing from, campaign managers, who are tracking ballots where we can to know that they've come back, are also weary of being too hopeful about the numbers that they're seeing. I think it was just this past week, the president was in Florida and kind of signaled to Republicans there that they should also be catching up in their vote by mail numbers, and we're starting to see that in VBM and early vote. So.
Yeah, Trump has been selective in where he thinks it's okay to absentee vote,
Right, right.
Administration from New York to Florida, he says, Florida is fine. And I will say, I do find it really ironic, though, that, listen, Florida could be the key to how we know how this is going on election night, truly. Which those of us that remember election 2000 is really hard to believe. But in the 20 years, they have gotten their act together. They really have a very good counting system. They're able to count some of these start counting some of these ballots ahead of election day. So I think that we can see early returns, not just from just day of vote, but from those absentee and those early votes. And listen, I find it hard to see an electoral scenario where if Trump doesn't carry Florida, how he wins the election. There are some, you can put together an electoral map where that happens. But realistically, when I look at the polls everywhere else, if he's not carrying Florida, I think that gives an idea. The network may not officially call it because we won't have the electoral votes in some of those other states that we have to get to 270. But I think that's just real hard for me to see how he does that. Texas is another thing that I think will have some early returns on election night too. And again, Texas very much in play. So I think, in North Carolina, I think we'll see North Carolina early numbers too again. So I think those could kind of give us a hint on how things are going on election night.
First of all, it warms my heart whenever Texas is in the toss-up conversation. We're trying to. I know there's and again, I think Georgia is a great indicator of this. Voter suppression is very real, and it also shows up in the way that voters are jaded and cynical. So yes, there's the actual throwing out of ballots. There's the actual purging from the voter rolls, but then the message that voters receive in that is why should I show up anyway? And so something that has warmed my heart of these long lines, particularly people waiting in the rain and things like that, is that it at least shows that they think it's worth putting forth the effort, which often I feel like that at least when I'm talking to people I know who are considering not voting, it's very much a why should I bother? And so I really
know people considering not voting
this go round.
Go around.
What's been wild is the amount of people, if we're honest, who have apologized to me. So in 2016, I'm doing Hillary stuff. I'm all in. I'm doing that, and just it was my first presidential race working, and so I was very excited, all in.
Right.
And of course, it went the way it went. And the amount of people who in the past 4 years have been girl, you was talking all that stuff, and I didn't vote, but I get it now. I'm y'all, we can't do. So I have encountered people who have been so on voting. Mainly you're overly woke and you're the ballot box will never be the way that we receive our freedom or whatever it is.
Sure. Yeah, abolitionists who don't believe in the democratic society as it currently exists.
But yeah, I do think overwhelmingly though, I have seen people who I know have if we can be, I guess, to be kind about it, I would say different politics than I do, who have realized like, oh, I need to show up, I need to vote, and I need to vote for Biden Harris. Like, I don't know. I have not met anyone who is wavering. If they're wavering, it's about not voting, not about
who they're supporting.
Yeah.
I think the funniest thing that has happened to me this go around is a similar experience where people are verifying with me their actual vote. So they're sending me a picture of their I voted sticker, or they're sending me like the kind of like polling booth like photo of their ballot where it's just like usually the presidential. I think people know that I will blast them publicly. I'm willing to do that this go around.
And that's where we all had to move as a people. I fully understand that. But that's definitely it. And kind of keeping that in mind, like transitioning us into hold up as far as something that's not being paid attention to on the level that it deserves. I want to start with Jessica, if you don't mind, on this one. What's something that you think is not receiving its due attention in our election conversations?
Well, I'll I have a part A and a part B. So I cover the Senate, and I've been writing since, March, truly, April, March, that the Senate was very much in play. And I wrote in July that Democrats were a slight favorite. And I think at the beginning of this month, really, Democrats are now a clear favorite. I would put it at about 60 to 70% chance that they flip the Senate. I talked to a lot of reporters. I'm on the other side now giving analysis from when I was a reporter, and these past few weeks have seemed to have been when everyone wakes up and realizes, hey, the Senate's in play too. And the fact that we could have, I think, again, I put it at about the same percentage, 60, 70%, that we could have a Democratic trifecta, really, where you have a Democratic House. I mean, the most likely thing to happen is that Democrats keep the House. In fact, I think they're going to add seats. That's overlooked, certainly. We project between 5 and 15 seats that Democrats are going to add, which after 2 years ago when they flipped 40 seats is just unheard of. And then I think the second most likely thing is that Biden is going to win in our projections. We right now have him getting over 270 votes, even with just races that we have in the lean column. That's not even considering toss-up races. And then I think it is the Senate. So I think, again, that adds a whole different thing of Democrats could get more priorities passed. You could push things through. And then it's how big of a majority are we talking about? I think that Democrats are going to pick up between 2 and 7 seats. They need a net of 3 if Biden and Harris win the presidency and vice presidency. And there are multiple paths at this point. There are 14 competitive seats. And 12 of those are Republicans playing defense, and just 2 Republican seats two Democratic seats where Republicans are playing offense. And then I think it's also, we've talked some about we may not know the outcome of the presidential race immediately on election night like we're used to, but there are 2 Senate races in Georgia, which I know both of you all have connections to there. Mm-hmm. So there's not 1, but 2 Senate races. And one is a special election where Kelly Loeffler was appointed, and this is a jungle primary. And so the top 2 vote getters, regardless of party, if no one hits 50%, which there's 20 candidates on the ballot, that's impossible, essentially. They would go to a January 5th, 2021 runoff. It looks like that's going to be Raphael Warnock, who is the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church there, Martin Luther King Jr.'s church. And, and then it's either going to be Loeffler or Doug Collins. They've both run so far to the right. I moved this race into the toss-up column a few weeks ago. I think this is a very gettable seat for them. And then the regular election, though, Georgia has a law, though, if in statewide races, if no candidate gets above 50%, it gets a clear majority, then those races go to a runoff too. That's happened in 1992, and it's happened in 2008 before. And I think this could happen again with Republican David Perdue and Democrat Jon Ossoff. And typically we have seen, when I look back at the historic totals, that Republicans have the advantage in that runoff. We've seen Republicans typically gain seats. In fact, in 1992, it was the Democrat that was ahead on election night. And then when it went to a runoff, the Republican Paul Coverdale ended up winning. But this is a changing Georgia. The fact that we are talking about Georgia as a very legitimate swing state, the polls that I have seen in the past few days even have Biden up 2 or 3. I mean, it's very gettable. And those Atlanta suburbs are just so fast changing, Cobb and Gwinnett counties. And that's where I think the difference is going to be made. I mean, Biden is there tonight, Tuesday night, when we're recording this. And so you could have 2 seats there up for grabs January 5th, 2021. I still think, though, that we can know the majority, who wins the majority in the Senate before that it's not going to be dependent upon that. So this could determine how big Democrat Senate majority is.
Very cool. You gave us a lot of information there to take in as far as what's up on election night. It seems like the idea of adding seats in the House, I'll be honest, I hadn't even weighed that, but that makes a lot of sense because 18 was big, and this year has been really, really rough for Republicans, particularly among those who are if you're in spaces that like the president, even areas that like him are skeptical of him right now. It's been a very interesting space.
We see a lot of House data that isn't, and my colleague Dave Wasserman follows the House more closely than I do, but he was sort of even seeing in 2016 that some of these areas that should have been Hillary Clinton winning them pretty easily, that Trump was gaining in them. So that was sort of a little bit of a canary in a coal mine that maybe we should have, that in the last few weeks that some people were seeing, okay, Trump could win this thing, and especially in places like Michigan and Wisconsin, that there was some of that data. But when we look at those same House level data right now, Trump is doing 12 to 15 points worse than he was in 2016. And that's consistent across the board. And I hear that from Republican pollsters. And to me, that just shows also, another thing that I hear. And I think for Democrats, I always experience a bit of PTSD when I'm talking to Democrats and Democratic strategists, because 2016, you expected one thing and then everything turned out wrong. So even, Democrats are like, okay, I see the polls, I see what it should be, but, so there is, I think, that little hesitancy. But pollsters have changed their methodology since then to where they are factoring in more white working class voters that they didn't pick up in those Rust Belt areas. And I almost think that they're sort of undersampling, though, in Sun Belt areas. So that's why we are seeing where I think, Democrats could even exceed where we are seeing in polling in Arizona, in Texas, perhaps in Georgia. But again, that House level data, which is the most granular of data that we look at, the fact that it is looking so bad for Trump in areas, again, that he has eroded by double digits in 4 years, tells me that top line data that we're looking at either nationally or at the state level is correct too.
Dorien, do you want to hop in here? How do you, hope anything you think we should add extra weight to?
Yeah, so I think I think that, yes, it's all eyes on Georgia. Kind of with my In Citizens United hat on, I think that it's also exciting for us at our organization that both Reverend Warnock and John Ossoff have raised a considerable and respectable amount of money, but have also done it by rejecting direct contributions from corporate PACs. So that is one thing that has excited us. And then also looking at what I would say are probably the 2 most competitive House races there in the state, in Georgia 6 and Georgia 7, those neighboring districts in the Atlanta suburbs with Lucy McBath, mother to Jordan Davis, and this being her first reelect, and she's in a very strong position, to do what needs to be done to continue into the next Congress. And then looking at Carolyn Bordeaux in Georgia 7, who lost by less than half a percentage point in 2018, back at it to put up a serious fight in that race. So I'm always gonna talk about my Georgia folks, being from there, and that's where my family's voting. But the second thing that I think is maybe not getting enough attention that's exciting to me, kind of staying in the House lane right now, is the expansion of the squad, right? And what that's going to look like in 2020 with Mondaire Jones in New York 17th Congressional District, all but certain to join the next Congress. Looking at Cori Bush coming in from Missouri. What does it mean for Marie Newman, who's also going to be joining the next Congress? So this progressive team of folks who are going to be joining, the well-known members of the squad. I'm just excited about the races that we already know, what the outcome will be on election day, and the fact that we have more candidates of color that are coming in, LGBT candidates of color. I'm thinking of Richie Torres, also there in New York. I mean, this is an exciting time for politics, but also as, a young person of color who identifies as LGBT. Like, there are a lot of really great personalities and stories that are coming to Congress that I think are more reflective of the, actual American, electorate than we've ever seen before. So I want that to get a little bit more attention. And I have my fingers crossed for a few others who I think also would fall in that category of, our rising progressives. So,
yeah. I would just, Dorien brings up a lot of good points, and I've seen the, Democrats campaigning on ending corporate PAC money and not taking corporate PAC money succeed in many other races, and in Iowa. And of course, the fact that Democrats have been able to raise so much money, candidate dollars, or go so much further than outside dollars. And so I think that's one reason why, while super PACs have been able to sort of even the spending, the candidate dollars or get the lower rate, so they're getting more gross ratings points. And then also that there are, from what I can tell, a record number of African American Senate nominees this cycle too.
That's a good point. Yeah,
very valid chances of winning. I mean, some of them I think face more uphill climbs. Adrian Perkins in Louisiana, that could also go to a runoff, but I think Louisiana is a tough state. And Mike Espy in Mississippi, Marquita Bradshaw in Tennessee, my home state. And we talked about Georgia, but the other one that I would point to is South Carolina that's getting a ton of attention. Jamie Harrison's raised, he didn't just, the previous record for the third quarter was $38 million that Beto O'Rourke set in 2018. And Harrison didn't just surpass it, he obliterated it with $57 million. And, I moved this race into toss-up a few weeks ago, and it made a huge splash. I went to college there in South Carolina. There's just something happening there, really. And the Lindsey Graham voters don't trust him anymore. He sort of, was in the middle, but then he turned from Trump critic to Trump ally, and that's alienated not just conservatives, but these moderate voters that did once vote for him. And I think this has gotten overlooked, that if Harrison were to pull off the upset and win, South Carolina would be the first state to have 2 Black senators. And of course, South Carolina is where the Civil War began.
Wow.
Jessica, that was actually that was my holdup. The Black Senate candidates that have shown up in places where you didn't think they would. So Espy down in Mississippi, especially, Warnock, of course, in Georgia, Harrison in South Carolina, not just showing up, but showing up and shattering, as you noted, fundraising numbers in ways that we haven't seen, to the point that, like, Senator Graham, for what he is a major and prominent Republican figure and has been for a while. Yeah. And to have him complaining openly in the way that he has about Jamie Harrison's fundraising numbers, I also think something that will hurt him in the long run is the Supreme Court hearing that took place over this past week. I think a lot of people, were turned off by the fact that the whole super spreader event even happened that led to what felt like half the administration having COVID. Then Senator Graham himself refused to take a COVID test so that he could put on this hearing. And then they rushed the vote on her last night, and 2 nights ago, I'm sorry. And it really, I think, rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. If in the event that anybody was still on the fence about that, I definitely think that that last move was desperate and will bite him in the event that there is anyone left undecided. I feel like Jamie Harrison has shown up in some pretty crucial and impactful ways in South Carolina. And I hadn't thought about both senators from South Carolina being Black, particularly because Tim Scott is Tim Scott. But I do think that that is something. There is a story there about Blackness in America for the state that began the Civil War to be the first state that has 2 Black senators. Yeah, that's powerful. Dorien,
a $100 million Senate race. I just am incredibly impressed, and I think that we know that it's not only Graham's unfavorability that's driving fundraising there, but the fact that Jamie Harrison is has been around, and remember when he was running for DNC chair. I mean, he is somebody who certainly Black folks have rallied around, and as we continue to think about the South and Black political power in the South, I think that he's become one of the case studies that we're just going to have to continue to study for time to come. And the other thing I found kind of fascinating about what the Harrison campaign has been able to do is even run negative ads, digital ads on the third party candidate, right? Calling out who the actual pro-life, pro-Trump, pro-gun, candidate is, perhaps even elevating his name ID, where that split could potentially be consequential. I just, I'm fascinated by that race, and I think that Jessica said it all, but never thought that there would be a day where we could be looking at a Senator Harrison and Senator Scott next to each other. That's definitely being overlooked.
And one of my friends in South Carolina who's white brought that up to me, and it's and Harrison is the type of I think he's on pace to really have record-setting, I think, Black turnout there in a state that too. But his ads have also, he's got to win over white college-educated voters in the state too, and in Georgia there as well. That's another key. So I think it's sort of twofold in how these candidates can win elections and have to be able to is it's in getting the Black turnout up, but also winning over white college voters. And those are voters that we have seen, especially women, turned off by Trump. And that, those are sort of really ripe for the picking, I think, in both the Georgia and the South Carolina Senate races too.
I appreciate that for both of you weighing in. Looking at transitioning into something that you're unapologetic about, or I ain't sorry, as I call it. What is something that happened in this cycle that you feel like cemented a space for you, something that you're like, you know what, I always knew that, and this just told me that even more so. Dorien, we can start with you.
Yeah, so I am going to go a bit more personal with this question. I think it was Kamala Harris being selected as the VP nominee for me. That is something that I ain't sorry about. I have pinned to my Twitter profile in 2011. I tweeted, I said, after Barack Obama's second term, I want to work on Kamala Harris's presidential campaign, and manifest it 9 years ago. But what I'm not sorry about, I think, is just seeing what, as a Black woman, as a biracial Black woman, as a child of immigrants, she has had to endure outside of, the to use Jessica's term earlier, the wildlife of American politics. There is a whole nother layer, I think, of pressure, of scrutiny, of bias that we have to, continue to address in our political system. And just the way that she has continued to campaign with joy, the way that she has, even stepped into this VP nominee role and continued to be true to herself, right? I just saw a video of her shopping for sneakers, right, on a digital ad that they did. But she's remained true to herself, and that's not easy to do in an industry where people are literally paid to poll and to test what it is that you should say and how it is you should be. So I am encouraged by that. I'm excited by that. I think there are so many other like young people of color, women of color, Black women specifically, who are ripe for running for office. And the fact that, they have this example in her is encouraging, as someone who just, knows that, it's hard out here. It's hard out here. And she has taken all of it in stride, from the primary and the tough loss there to even the deep stakes and the types of conversations that were being attributed to the Black candidates, but also just the women in the race, right? It's the catfight narrative that is so played and so tired that we're exhausted of seeing. I'm excited about that. And yeah, I cannot wait to call her MVP a week or so from today. Well, it'll be much longer before we know, but
Right.
but you get the point. You get the point.
Right. And I wanted to also take a moment to say something that has warmed my heart has been little Black girls dressed up as Kamala Harris, little Black girls like looking up, mainly because I didn't have the options. So as a little Black girl in Texas, I remember dressing up as Condoleezza Rice, right? That was who I had to look up to.
Wow. I want to see those pictures, Lauren. You have to post those.
Oh God, no! Oh, I was cute though, but we can leave that in Mesquite. But I do think that the fact that these girls are seeing themselves in Senator Harris so well, the fact that she has leaned into that in the way that she has, we know that Secretary Clinton in 2016 really, it took her a while to come around. In 2008 and 2016 to the narrative of being the first woman president and what that would mean to little girls everywhere. Definitely, she leaned into it more in 2016 than she did in 2008.
Yeah.
But I definitely think Senator Harris embraced it from the beginning. And it's been powerful to see people reflect that and be excited about that. And I think the note about her being biracial too matters because it is so much of the American story. I think that she embodies different cultures and has like fused those together to make those cultures, because in addition to being biracial herself, she's also in an interracial marriage. And so ways that like all of that comes together to reflect a very unique experience, I think has been beautiful to watch her exemplify and lean into with such grace and class on the campaign trail.
And I have to say this because I think it's easy to get caught up in the identity politics of her candidacy.
Sure.
She also is uniquely qualified to be in executive leadership and has been in executive leadership for years. So, people talk about Hillary Clinton being the most qualified woman to ever, or person, period, to seek the presidency. Kamala Harris also comes to the table with levels of qualification, that I don't have to rattle off, to folks listening to the call, and she has been doing this for decades, and it's great to see, both of those things at play.
Yeah. And I love the fact that her stepkids call her Mamala, or, she doesn't consider them. Right. I think they're just a good example of, a blended family, and that she gets along with her husband's ex-wife. And it's just, it's good to see, I think, certainly too. And yeah, to your point about I remember when I was working at Politico back in 2010, one of the stories we did then that I think the first time I heard the name Kamala Harris was that we were identifying her as, a rising star, and that she sort of had that Obama quality to her when we were looking at it and stuff too. And, I think one of them, that unfortunately, that there is this sort of thing, fear of the other, that we are seeing people stoke, just 2 weeks ago when David Perdue got up there on stage and was, mocking her name. And, and every time I hear someone mispronounce her name, I'm like, it's Kamala. It's not that hard.
It's really not. And while we're here, Jessica, was there something that you are unapologetic about, or that you've learned this cycle that you'll definitely carry with you?
I think that, in this role I'm in now, I have to make a lot of I make, what we do, we handicap, and it's not, full predictions. We're saying based on the available data, here's what we see. But, I think we were ahead of the curve in saying that, the Georgia Senate races were more in play, and I got a lot of Republican pushback, and guess what? They're right now neck and neck, and same thing with South Carolina. And I think it's just still, a razor's edge right there too. And I think that, overall, though, what we have seen, I think, what surprised me has been somewhat unsurprising, is that how unsurprising it's been how stable just the presidential race has been when we look back toward this, really since the pandemic hit. Trump got a slight bump, sort of the rally around the flag effect after COVID hit. But then after it became pretty clear how much they were mismanaging it, and I cover the governor's races too, and governors across the board, Republicans and Democrats, were handling it better. I think we're sort of stepping up in sort of the absence of leadership to fill that vacuum, and to now where I think really there's only two governor's races right now that are even competitive. There's only 11 on the ballot, but the fact that Republican governors in New Hampshire and Vermont are going to get reelected pretty easily, I think, because they handled the pandemic well. And it's sort of, you step up, you're tested in times of crisis. And that's what we elect people for. And really since April, really, it's been at least a 7-8 point race in the presidential race. And, I think it ticked up a little bit to double digits right after that first debate and Trump getting COVID. And I think I will just carry forward probably, just where, that I think it's just sad when I see how politicized basic things like mask wearing have become. And that we do see, the Republican gubernatorial candidate in North Carolina, has made his closing message, I don't believe that masks fully work. But you have Republican governors in New Hampshire and Vermont that are more difficult states that are getting reelected because they have said that they do. And in Vermont, they have a mask mandate. And it's just if you want to get back to any semblance of normalcy until we get a vaccine, until we get this thing more under control, it's literally the easiest thing that you could do. They come in cute colors now. You can match them with your outfit if you want, but to do that, to do social distancing and, I think just down the stretch. And I really do think that even Republicans that I talk to realize that's been a strategic mistake that the White House has made, but they can't, and when Trump went out there yesterday, I think he tweeted, 3 times, COVID, COVID, COVID. It was like Marsha, Marsha, Marsha. This is the number one issue on voters' minds because it's touched everybody. No one has not been affected by this pandemic, while some have been touched and unfortunately affected way more than others if they've lost a loved one to this pandemic, or if they know. I think virtually everyone probably at this point knows someone that has gotten it. And things, and it's just, you can't sweep it under the rug. You can't just pretend that it's not happening because, that's why we, I'm looking at election night. I've never not been in a newsroom that I have this, setup I've had to create here at home, like we all have to do TV things. And it's very weird. And my 900 square foot condo is feeling really small. So
completely understood. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and transition into Drunken Love there, because I think what you've touched on is what my particular rant is. So one, this evening I'm drinking tequila and cran pineapple. That is what I will probably be drinking until the election, because that's where we are. That in addition to water, because it's important to be hydrated out here. But I want to take a second to say that Trump has COVID arguably could have been a neutral.
Or it could have helped me if he didn't.
Or it could have helped, right? This idea that Trump was a mess all 4 years, was completely and totally said offensive things, was disrespectful to other world leaders, embarrassed America on the world stage, disparaged reporters regularly, cycled through press secretaries like they were pants, just complete. I can't. I'm sure we could probably name at least 5 tell-alls between the 3 of us that have come out of this administration that have further made abundantly clear that this administration is a joke on its best day and an active hindrance to American success on its worst. It is a
survival,
right?
Let alone not even success, survival. And then COVID shows up, and had he handled it well, could have been his saving grace.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is all anyone's talking about now. It is all everyone's concerned with, and rightfully so, because it's a global pandemic. But the idea that even when this is over, he will be the president with, over 220,000 bodies on his doorstep due to mismanagement of this virus. That he will be. But let's not forget
we lost in Vietnam. Which you think,
right? All of that. And
And
let's also acknowledge that he had been terrible before that. And so I think it's interesting that he's so angry. Like, I think he should actually be grateful that people are only talking about his mismanagement of COVID as opposed to the complete clusterfuck, sorry, Mom, that this administration has been, period.
Well, and there's this too, Lauren. Not only is he facing the reality of, the fatalities and in this pandemic, but you're simultaneously fighting the Affordable Care Act in the Supreme Court. So, I do think that, maybe he could have handled this better or fared better, but I think people still will see right through that. We're talking about pre-existing conditions and folks being able to stay on their parents' insurance and all these things that are the pillars of the Affordable Care Act that he is literally trying to dismantle during a global pandemic that, that is in some people's eyes of his perpetuation, just the way that our country has handled it. There's no excuse. And I think that we'll see voters, make that clear. And
the pandemic and healthcare go hand in hand with so many voters. I mean, healthcare was the reason that Democrats took back the House in 2019. And I think it's going to be a big reason why I think they're favored to take back the Senate in 2020. And it still just baffles me that after running on 6 years of repealing and replacing the Affordable Care Act, that when they did have a unified Republican government, that they had no plan.
What is the plan?
And that Trump, every time he says, I'm going to have a plan in 2 weeks, and there is no plan. And this isn't something you can just do by, executive order, which he, of course, criticized Obama for repeatedly. And that, Leslie Stahl interview, which I love Leslie Stahl, and, but, hands her that big book and says, this is the healthcare plan. And then she's like, there was no healthcare plan in it. So it's just, Obamacare was a negative for Democrats. I mean, in 2010, it's why they lost the House, and it has changed. And I really do think it's that people, whether they had it, sometimes it takes time for big policy change to, sort of implement in the minds of voters. And it is something that people have now come to rely on. And, ultimately there is no backstop really if, depending upon what happens with this, hearing, now with a 6-3 conservative court that's going to happen a week after Election Day. So, and that's something that I think Republicans are going to pay. They paid the price for at the ballot box in 2018, and I think they're going to pay the price for in 2020. And again, a lot of this, much like COVID, was avoidable because you knew you kept saying you wanted to repeal it. Well, what's the plan?
I could not believe when Senator Peter's opponent was asked the question, John James, what is, the replacement plan? And he had nothing, and he fumbled through what I believe was a local interview. But we're seeing that we're seeing that they're being put on the spot because this is what the Dems are running on, and strategically it's the right thing to do, especially given this pandemic and what folks are facing every day. So
agree. Yeah. Dorien or Jessica, Dorien, is there anything you wanted to leave us with that you maybe had wish you'd gotten a chance to say earlier, or any type of plug you want to make?
I think that we kind of have come to this point in the conversation and maybe even started to address it, but just the fact that we talk about 220,000 Americans who have perished during this pandemic, and at this point there are updated numbers that come across the ticker on the news screen, or you see it at attack ads or wherever. But I just think that it's so important to remember that these are aunts and uncles. These are real people. These are neighbors. There are people who I know who have passed from COVID. So I just think that there has to be a concerted effort to continue to inject the humanity in this loss of life. And I think that this is something that we are going to be collectively unpacking the trauma of for years and years to come. So I just hope that that's not lost on people this cycle, cutting through the politics, that, this is a very big deal. And we have a responsibility, I think, to say those people's names and to acknowledge the lives that were lived and lost.
Yeah. And to that point too, I think that, Lauren, you talked about that Trump really could have had an opportunity to, step up to the job he was elected to do in handling this. And I think that he had another opportunity. I'm not sure that it would have changed the trajectory of the race, but after he himself got COVID, to come out and say, listen, I understand what people go through now, that anyone can truly get it. I know that I got the best healthcare that is available in the world and that not everyone gets this. And we need to really take this more seriously. You need to wear masks. You need to do this. But he didn't do that. He seemed, again, it's his ego that gets in the way. He says, oh, maybe it made me invincible. And he's continued to hold these rallies that are just, they're outdoors. Most of them are, but still packed door to door. I don't know about you all, but like, I see that many people together. I mean, I watch a TV show now, that was taped pre-COVID. And I'm like, so I'm very glad I'm not out there too, but I have a lot of friends that are White House reporters or traveling with him too, that I know have had close calls, certainly that, reporters are also, not that we're, a frontline worker or by any means, I'm not trying to suggest that, but that are trying to cover this president and to, get information out there that the public needs. But, I think that it's just, when you saw that, I think in his town halls and then the debate that, certainly I don't think it was as much of a train wreck as the first one, but when he talks about this, he talks about it like it's just a nuisance, really. And he had a chance to show empathy, and every time he has been given that chance, he passes on it. And I think one of the things that you see with Joe Biden really is he is one of the most empathetic politicians. And I think it's also driven by who he is, but also the fact that he has had such immense loss in his life. I've watched him deliver eulogies for many politicians, John McCain. And, he is someone who can speak to that, just what a life means. And I think he is a man that has a deep faith behind him too, that he can speak to in a way that I think, the president does not clearly, more than just words. And so I think it's that empathy that people are looking for right now. And I think that's another reason you see Biden with a very substantial lead in that category as well.
I have enjoyed the both of you so much. I enjoy, of course, both of you as individuals, and now you both come on today, and I've enjoyed you, Eve, as just as much together. Yeah. So in the event that someone wants to find you to further ask questions about the brilliance that you shared this evening, Jessica, what's the best way they do that?
You can follow me on Twitter. It's just at Jessica Taylor. You can check out our final electoral and Senate and House and governor ratings that are going to be coming out this week at cookpolitical.com. And then actually on election night, I'm going to be offering analysis throughout the night on C-SPAN.
Sounds good. And Dorien?
I am on Twitter at Dorien Paul. It's Dorien with an E instead of an A, Dorien Paul. I tweet there about a lot of candidates that I support and other things that are happening in my life and world. And I'm also at Dorien Paul on Instagram too.
Sounds good. I appreciate having you. And if both of you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here. You have just heard this episode of Unbossed, Unbothered, and Unfiltered. In the event that you're interested in following me, you can follow me at Lauren Zayu on Twitter and Instagram. You can also follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Thank you so much for being with us, and I hope to see you on this journey. Thank you for tuning in to Unbossed, Unbothered, and Unfiltered with host Lauren Zayu and music by Lighthouse Productions. For more information on Unbossed, Unbothered, and Unfiltered, or to review today's episode, please follow at Lauren Zayu on Twitter and Instagram, or subscribe to the Lauren Zayu YouTube channel.